Whenever I did the unopening of Skyrim, I actually got a lot of positive feedback from doing that. So I figured, why not? I'll make it a reoccurring ordeal. So I've already opened this game, I've already played it, but it goes back to the saying, never judge a book by its cover. The exact same thing goes for video games and movies. I went to this is a game that I always just kind of saw and glanced at it, and I was like, that looks absurdly boring and annoying. And so I actually was looking at horror games. The top 10 people's list of the best horror games for the 360. And 3 out of 5 of the list, they had this one particular game as number 1. So I was like, I'll give it a shot, I'll take a look at it. And I am talking of the highly acclaimed and highly adored 2010 film, Alan Wake. The first look at this game, I thought, that cover could not be more bland. It's the same thing as putting a black cover with your title strewn across the center. That one can slide. Alan Wake is one of those games, it deserves all the recognition that it gets. It is really, really fun. However, I have some points I want to make out about it. Psychological action thriller is how it's labeled on the actual cover. The storyline to this game, although very complicated at times, is really well written, and I really, really like it. I have some problems with the ending, but we'll get into that. The characters, all of them are actually really lovable. Even the character you play as is probably the most douchey of all of them, but you actually understand his purpose and why he's behaving the way he is, and he's a really cool character to play as. This game references Stephen King, and it probably takes a lot of inspiration from Alfred Hitchcock. It's probably based off of Alfred Hitchcock book, for all I know. It feels very Stephen King, Alfred Hitchcock-ish as you play it. The game makes a lot of pop culture references as well, referencing Stephen King, and it even threw in some Lord of the Rings and Star Wars lines here and there, so I was like, that's awesome. It takes place, our time period. The way it plays is very much unlike anything you've probably ever played before. People will say it's very similar to Resident Evil or Silent Hill or Army of Darkness. But the way I see it, it's actually very unique in the gameplay. The controls are actually very well done, very fluid. Your number one weapon is actually a flashlight. I'm not going to spoil anything game-wise because it's an action horror thriller ordeal. But your main weapon is actually a flashlight, fighting the darkness, as they call it. And it's actually really well done. How you can't actually kill an enemy until you use the flashlight on them and it drains their dark power. I can't explain it, but it's cool and it's there. The story does get rather confusing at times. It takes place between a dream world and a real world, and it's really hard to tell sometimes which one you're in. That's kind of the point. At the same time, it needs to be driven a little better. The graphics in this game are phenomenal. That's about as good as I can put it. They are phenomenal graphics for a 2010... It's a 2010 game with phenomenal graphics. The people that made this game, Remedy, are very unknown. They're in charge of the Max Payne games, and they did something else, but they are a very unknown company, and I think Alan Wake is going to change that. It already has a huge fan base. I know they're working on a sequel, but their graphic engine is amazing. Their cutscenes are amazing. The only problem with the cutscenes is the lip sync. The lip sync is atrocious. It's not very good at all. It doesn't match the syllables. Just words are being said, and they just kind of threw the words over the people talking. The lip sync definitely was annoying. Another thing that was actually quite annoying was the variety of enemies. This game claims to have... I'm trying to remember what the words they used, but they were like, in a world where you don't know what to trust, anything is out to get you. And that's true. I mean, there's like barrels that'll fly at your head, and there's like cars that will fly at your head. You have to duck and dodge them. But that is about it. Just barrels and cars. That's about it. Besides the... they're called the Taken, which is the human beings that have been possessed by the darkness. But there's probably only 3 varieties. You have the Staggers, you have the ones that are the Flash on steroids, and you have the kind that wield these humongous weapons. And you have some that like throw things. That's kind of the Staggers. It's very limited in the amount of enemies they had, and I really think they could have done more with it. I mean, animals controlled by the darkness would have been awesome. That does remind me, there are birds that are possessed by the shadow and try and kill you. Again, Alfred Hitchcock comes to mind. But there are birds that come to life. But I think they could have taken advantage of that. I think they could have used more enemies, more animals, more objects that can be thrown at your face. It would have made the game probably a lot harder, which the difficulty in this game is pretty good. It's very challenging. At the same time, you know you can beat it if you just tweak your things a little bit more. Difficulty, A+. It's not the hardest game I've ever played in my life, but it's up there. It takes some practice to get used to ducking and diving and getting away from all the enemies that are out there. My hair is really weird today. But yeah, Alan Wake, the ending, I like the ending. And at the same time, I hate it. It's one of those games where I'm surprised more people are not talking about the ending of this game. Because it really is a cliffhanger kind of ending. I just kind of wish that it had a more subtle of an ending. It's very... I had to kind of watch this cutscene 2 or 3 times to fully grasp what the hell just happened. But I really can't explain the ending without giving anything away, but let me just tell you, it feels unfinished. But at the same time, that might be what they were aiming for. It's not really my preference. But I actually really, really like this game. Would I go out and buy it? I did. You could probably beat it in a weekend. It probably took me about 8 to 10 hours to beat. There are mini ordeals, like go and get 100 coffee cups, or go and get all the manuscripts that you've written as your character in the past. And those things are just kind of there to make the game longer. And I'm usually really, really against that kind of thing. And nothing's really changed here. I really am. I think that they could have done with some side quests. I know the game is linear, and at this time of RPGs and huge open world environments, this game is not as linear as most games are, but it is still a linear game. Not that there is a problem with that. Not that there's a problem with that. Linear games can be extremely exciting, extremely well done, and this is a great example of a really well done linear game. Batman Arkham Asylum is another one that comes to my mind, very similar in the linearness. You could probably beat it in a weekend if you're not excited about getting achievements, and I'm not either. I play games for the story, not to get a higher not a higher score than somebody else. But yeah, that's kind of my review of Alan Wake. If I was to give it a score, probably an 8 or 10, and 8 out of 10. It sets out to do what it wants to do, and with what it wants to do, it's really good at. I just think that they could have added a lot of things and taken some things maybe even away. Remedy games expressed in their the Max Payne games, they're not the first ones to ever do this, but they're one of the ones that have actually made it really well. They've done bullet time with their action. And I thought I would get really, really bored of that and really annoyed. And I didn't. About the time you start to get annoyed with it, the game's over. So, Bullet time, it looks cool, but they probably could have made that a little bit more less than what they did. The game clocks in probably about 10 hours if you're not interested in, if you're just interested in the story. So a longer story would have been cool. The way it's set up is actually really interesting. It's kind of set up like an AMC television show. There's only 6 levels in this game. All fairly lengthy. All 6 levels are fairly lengthy. It's set up like a TV show. You'll get to a certain point in a cutscene and it'll just kind of go to the title scene, and then it'll fade into previously on Alan Wake. It sounds really corny, but it's actually really efficient and really cool. I like the way they did that. So, Alan Wake, I'd say play it. Don't necessarily buy it unless you're really into horror, thriller ordeals. But definitely check it out if you have a 360. I believe it's coming to the PC eventually, within the next year or two. But if you have a 360, definitely recommend playing it. It's Alan Wake for you, and I hope that you guys enjoyed the Alan Wake review. See ya.